and must be a path forward that delivers on not just our promises to Ukraine, but our vital national security interests in helping Ukraine defend itself against this brutal war of aggression.
Quick follow-up on that. With the vote expected tomorrow and it's likely to fail, what is the White House willing to compromise on when it comes to the border?
Certainly, I'm not going to stand here and negotiate in public, but I think that the president has been very, very clear, and senior administration officials will be very clear to every single member of the House and Senate today about what the stakes are in Ukraine at this moment. Jake, again, laid this out very clearly. OMB Director Shalonda Young laid this out very clearly in her letter. There's not some magical pot of funding that exists to support Ukraine if Congress doesn't come through on this critical request that we've put forward. We are about 97% of the way through that funding, and it's, time is running out, funds are running out. By the end of the year, we're going to be in a place where it's going to be difficult to continue providing support to Ukraine without dipping into our own stockpiles and degrading our own military readiness. And so
to compromise on the border, I mean, border negotiations are on, and that is why the vote is expected to fail tomorrow.
Look, I would just make a couple points on this. I mean, President Biden introduced comprehensive immigration reform on day one. So we've spent about 3 years being ready to sit down and have a serious conversation on immigration reform, but House Republicans have declined to take us up on that. And so right now, look, we're in the same place. If Republicans want to have a serious conversation about immigration reform, we're ready to do that. But we also need them to move expeditiously and take action now to fund our critical national security needs, which, by the way, include funding for border security and to stop the flow of fentanyl into the country.
So it's fair to say that the president is absolutely not willing to lose funding for Ukraine by not moving closer to Republican demands on immigration.
I'm not going to go farther than what the president has said and the OMB director has laid out. I'm not going to negotiate in public, but I think we've been pretty clear that we find fault in a lot of the proposals that the House Republicans have put forward. And at the same time, we've been willing to have a serious conversation at the table for 3 years on comprehensive immigration reform. What we cannot do is delay on funding our critical national security needs, which, by the way, includes a request from the president to fund border security and stem the flow of fentanyl into the country.
Senator Cornyn said that the mistake Democrats are making is thinking that this is a negotiation. Ukraine aid is dependent on you guys adopting Republican border measures. House Speaker Johnson, in a letter today, said, again, reemphasized his desire to see H.R. 2 passed. You noted that there are differences that the White House holds with it, but it's your understanding that the Republican position at this point is that you have to pass H.R. 2 to unlock Ukraine money?
Look, I can't speak for what House Republicans are doing. I think we've made our position clear. We believe that it's time to take expeditious action, that Congress needs to act without delay, pass supplemental funding on our critical national security needs. We're happy to have a serious conversation about immigration policy. Happy to do that. But it cannot, we've got to move now on this supplemental request.
Vladimir Putin's headed to Saudi Arabia and the UAE for talks. Do you guys have any response to that? Are you concerned by those conversations and what they could mean for both Ukraine and what's going on in Israel?
Fortunately, I'm not a spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, so I would refer you to other foreign leaders to speak to their travel. I just don't have anything to say about others' travel.
Cornyn's remarks last night, Schumer called it a textbook case. With Cornyn's remarks last night tying Ukraine funding with border security, Schumer said this morning that it was a textbook case of hostage taking. There's words like extortion being used. Does the president agree with this viewpoint?
I don't think, we're not going to ascribe motive here. Jake talked about this a little bit yesterday. What we're focused on doing is speaking to the real world outcome of what not funding Ukraine wouldn't mean. And, Jake really laid that out in stark terms yesterday, what it would mean in terms of handicapping Ukraine's ability to defend itself, shortchanging of equipment, of munitions, and other resources it needs to defend itself in the face of Russia's brutal aggression.
You mentioned all the people who are going and advocating for Ukraine funding. Is the president getting involved? Is he making personal phone calls at any point?
Well, the president has been making the case for this publicly and privately. I believe the last time I talked to all of you, I had just read out a conversation with returning CODEL members from a CODEL to the Middle East, where he had also, as part of that meeting with senators that occurred late at night, spoke to them about the urgency of Ukraine funding. And that was over a month ago, I think. So the president has been making this case publicly and privately for some time. Senior administration officials will continue to do that today and work urgently to get this done.
Fellow Republicans themselves.
I don't have any calls to read out for you specifically.
Is the White House still insisting that the supplemental go in the form that you presented, like that it has to be all 4 items together?
Not going to get into sort of negotiating in public about this, but I think we've been clear about, in OMB Director Young's letter, about what we need to see in terms of funding for our critical national security board.
And on immigration, why are Democrats not demanding that there be a solution for Dreamers or for guest workers or some of these items that have been longstanding and relatively popular policies?
I'm not sure I understand your question, because I think we've been trying to have that conversation since the very first day the president came into office.
In these specific negotiations, it doesn't seem like any of that stuff is on the table.
I'm not going to get into the private discussions that we've been having about border policy, but I think the president's positions on this have been quite clear.
If it looks like you're not able to get the full $60 billion supplemental for Ukraine, would the White House be open to a shorter term funding bill that maybe could pass through Congress a little bit easier?
Again, I don't think it's productive for me to negotiate out here and to get into hypotheticals about what we would or would not do. This is something that our team continues to talk to lawmakers about and make sure that we are in a position to. Again, this is not just about Ukraine. It's not just about Israel. It's not just about, this is about our national security. And I think, on that basis, we went forward to Congress with a national security supplemental request that we thought would have bipartisan buy-in, because it is fundamental to America's national interests.
Sorry, I just have one question on Israel. It's been a very deadly couple of days in Gaza. The UN has warned about a catastrophe unfolding in the south. WHO director yesterday said they were told to move some medical supplies from their facilities. I'm just wondering if the administration has any concerns about the way Israel's conducting its operation in the south, and if it would like to see it behave differently given the number of Palestinians who are concentrated there.
I think, Jake addressed this pretty clearly yesterday, and my colleagues in the State Department did as well. I think it's too early to offer sort of a comprehensive assessment of this latest phase in the fighting so far, since the humanitarian pause ended as a consequence of Hamas reneging on their end of the deal late last week. But what I will say is Israel has heard from us loud and clear our expectation that they uphold international humanitarian law, abide by the rules of war, and take steps to minimize, to every extent possible, civilian casualties as they persecute this war against Hamas. Now, as they've moved into the south, where Israelis believe, the Israeli leadership believes, senior Hamas officials are hiding. I think we've detailed previously steps that we've taken to advise Israel on steps that they can take in urban warfare settings to minimize civilian casualties. We've also seen steps that they've taken in recent days to apprise and notify people on the ground, civilians on the ground, by both digitally and via leaflet campaigns about the imminent ground maneuvers they're about to undertake. And so we are seeing some signs of that nature. We have been obviously encouraging Israel to do all that they can as a modern military to try and mitigate civilian casualties. And I would just add one more thing, which is that the continued flow of humanitarian aid, including the humanitarian aid I just announced that the United States was responsible for facilitating today, continues to be critical in also meeting the needs of those civilians who are fleeing to the safe zones in the south.
I just had a quick follow-up on that, Olivia, just in terms of sort of the steps that, you laid out Israel is taking. Would you say that they're taking greater care to avoid civilian deaths in line with requests from the U.S.?
I'm not going to offer us an assessment of that at this stage. I think, as Jake and others have said yesterday, it's, it's early days. We're not going to do a play-by-play. What we can say is that, we have had direct and consistent conversations with Israeli counterparts about what our expectations are as they prosecute this war against Hamas, which, by the way, and just in case it needs to get reiterated, continues to launch rockets at Israeli civilian neighborhoods, continues to say that they are intent on, launching October 7th after October 7th after October 7th until Israel's wiped from the map. So, Israel is is fighting an existential threat, and we recognize that. At the same time, we also continue to communicate the substantial need to take great care with civilian life.
There's a CNN report that the president is looking at announcing new actions to lower healthcare costs. I was curious if there's anything you have to preview, or if you could speak to what the administration is planning to do as far as additional healthcare policy.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you that I don't have a grand announcement to make for you on the plane today, Brett. But I think, as you've seen, this president has made it a top priority to lower costs for Americans, including by lowering healthcare premiums, by lowering the cost of prescription drugs, by finally winning the decades-long battle against the big pharma to allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, to cap the cost of insulin. So, the president is somebody who understands what a significant burden it is on American people who are, in some cases, seniors were paying thousands of dollars out of pocket for life-saving cancer drugs. The president is fighting to end that. And he knows, because he hears it all across the country, how much it means to people to rein that in. And you've seen significant action from him already, and it shouldn't come as any surprise that remains a huge priority.
Any comment on why the public events on the schedule today are all political? There's nothing official. And does that mean the campaign is picking up the costs for today's flight?
Well, of course, anytime there's political travel, there are a set of federal regulations that govern the cost sharing. And so today's travel is certainly being paid for in full compliance with federal regulations, and that assessment is made by the White House counsel's office. With respect to sort of whether this is something new, I just think you can expect to see there are going to be some days where the president has all official travel. There'll be some days it's all political travel. There'll be some days where it's a mix of both things. So, that's just going to be the natural course of things here.
There's a lot of fundraising travel happening, with so much going on back in DC. Can we lost my point?
With so much going, which is, the president is president wherever he is. Some of you might have been with him over Thanksgiving when you ended up having 3 press conferences over the holiday weekend on the news breaking on the hostage deal, the calls to heads of state. So, the president is president wherever he is. During our short trip to Boston today, whether he's traveling locally. You'll be the first to know.
Is the White House aware of or involved at all in the explosion in Arlington last night?